Zdeb, and with me is Dixie Cochran.
Hello.
And Matthew. Matthew?
Nope. No.
He's not here?
I don't see him.
Oh.
Yeah, no, I don't see him. I don't know where he went.
Huh. Well, we'll look into that. Maybe we'll have him next week. But in the meantime...
I mean, does he really bring anything to the podcast?
We did threaten to fire him a couple weeks ago.
Oh, we did. Well, he's been going through that weird, existential crisis, self-reflection thing recently anyway. So maybe we'll just give him this week off to reflect a little bit on all of his moans. And then he can come back with fresh moans next week.
He can wander off into the sea, which is the only place he is truly happy. But,
I mean, he's going to come back there, right? I'm actually a little concerned.
I'm sure he'll be fine. He'll persevere and come back and tolerate our abuse yet again.
Okay, cool. Okay, so what are we talking about this week?
So this week, it's actually pretty cool. I got a chance to interview Ashley, Zdeb, and Pucci, which are two of the people we work with at Eschaton Media on the Dystopia Rising license. It was a really cool chance because we've done a lot of interviews with people we work with, this kind of the freelancers and the developers on internal stuff. But I thought it might be cool to actually talk to people that we work with from a license perspective. To kind of dig into what the Dystopia Rising license is like, but also what the relationship was. And so we had some really cool conversations about what kind of decisions we made when we were going through the early design stages, and also just kind of how scary it is to change a property that's been established for a decade.
Well, yeah, because Dystopia Rising, it's a LARP based on a tabletop game. So, but it's been mostly LARP for the past decade, right? I've never run into anybody who plays first edition Dystopia Rising. I'm sure they're out there. I'm sure I'm going to get an angry letter now.
So actually, I do go into this in the interview, but the LARP came first, I found out later.
Did it really?
Yes, I was mistaken. So the Kickstarter talks about how it was derived from tabletop role-playing games. I was wrong. So the tabletop game came from the LARP itself.
That's not just you. That's the rhetoric I've heard several times. It's it was a tabletop game, and then it was okay, so it was a LARP, and then at some point they made a tabletop game.
Yeah. But
that was a long time ago.
Right.
Why is our industry so confusing, Eddie? I just want to make games.
It's the second edition of the first edition of the table. Yeah, right, exactly.
Second edition of the first edition of the tabletop game derived from the LARP.
Yes.
Which is currently in its second or third iteration.
It's going to be in its third iteration, yes.
Cool, great, yeah. This all makes so much sense.
So that's why I thought it was worth sitting down and talking to them about all of this and kind of untangling everything, so...
This is like trying to read comics that have movies based on them as well as TV shows and then spin-off comics, and then they come back and they retcon everything and start over, and trying to explain comic arcs to people when I worked in a comic store is the only thing that has prepared me for trying to explain Dystopia Rising Evolution.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's have you ever tried to explain Spider-Man to someone who's never really watched Spider-Man movies? It's okay, I've watched this movie, but that movie's not the same as that Spider-Man movie. Because it's a different Spider-Man, but they're not connected.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So let's kind of dive into that, and so we could all together untangle the wonderful world that is Dystopia Rising. Hi, it's Eddie Webb, and I am not with either of my co-hosts today. I'm flying solo on the podcast because I have two guests with me, Ashley Zdeb and Michael Pucci, both from Eschaton Media. So, hey guys, thanks for coming to the podcast.
Hello.
Hey, how are you?
Good. And at the time we're recording, we are a couple of days into the Dystopia Rising Evolution Kickstarter. We funded in about 18 hours, which is fantastic. Really excited about that.
Yeah.
And so I thought it'd be cool to bring you both on the show because you guys are the heart of Dystopia Rising. You're certainly the two people I worked with a lot, so I thought it might be fun to kind of just talk about Dystopia Rising in general, about the project in particular, and anything else that comes up. So one of the things I wanted to start with is I made a mistake, and this is very, very hard for me to admit publicly on the air, but... In the Kickstarter video, I say that the DRE, Dystopia Rising Evolution, is the second edition of the tabletop role-playing game that spawned a live-action game. And many, many people corrected me on that. So do you guys want to explain to me actually what the history of Dystopia Rising is and how it came to be?
Sure. If you want to take it, Michael, or I'm happy to.
Go for it. I talk too much anyway.
So let's see if we'll get into the Wayback Machine. Back in something like 2008, Michael and I were sitting around in his living room, and he said, "I want to run a game for a living." And I was like, "Yeah, that sounds like fun. Why not?"
That's a viable career path, right?
It's honestly how that's not even apocryphal. That is legitimately how it happened.
Yeah.
And we went, and Michael's told this story many times, we went to a music festival, I think probably a couple months later, and it was on the beach, and there was a crazy storm, like just canopies flying off into the wilderness. It was quite a thing. And from there, it spawned, I think, in Michael, the idea of like, what does community do, and what do people do when kind of everything goes to hell? And so from that came DR. So in February of 2010, we ran the first module ever at a convention in New Jersey. And then we had the first ever LARP event in March up in Connecticut. So we played the LARP for, I think, about 2 years, give or take. And we partnered up eventually with the other people who work in Eschaton Media and kind of made the tabletop line out of that. And it had originally started that we were doing kind of a separate thing. It was like, there's the LARP and there's the tabletop, and, some of the information is the same. But as years went by, it became more and, our focus was more and more the LARP.
Right.
20 branches now, and, it's kind of all over the place. And so the material kind of naturally progressed into being canon and the same for everything. And if you look at the first line of the tabletop and you look at the expansion books in order of their publishing, I think you can kind of watch the progression of it moving away from worrying about like the mechanics and how it all works, and more just world material that we were trying to make available.
Yeah, and I think where a part of the confusion comes in is like on a system and design level, Dystopia Rising like was multiple different concepts and projects I had beforehand, but at the time I was working 80 hours a week at a job I really disliked and doing it on the side, and when the idea came together at the festival and the giant monsoon that attempted to wash away a ton of hippies, I cannibalized bits and pieces from other projects I had been working on, taking the best bits from here, best bits from there. And at that point, I had already started writing the tabletop book, but I was also working 80 hours a week. So, there was only so much you can do for what you saw as your hobby pet project.
Right. And I think that's actually pretty typical of people when they're starting off to kind of make this a full-time career. I know I worked nights and weekends on stuff as a freelancer and on personal projects. And you're right, it's exhausting to work a lot of time and try to come home, and even though you're just sitting at a computer and typing, it's still mentally and emotionally exhausting to do that. And so it's hard to kind of just keep that pace up.
Yeah. Without a doubt.
I worked on an ambulance for the first probably 2 years that we were running DR.
Oh, wow.
And I would be in between calls, I would be answering work emails on my phone or eventually on my iPad. And it was a great job, but I was happy to eventually move to just one focus.
Yeah, I could certainly see that. And actually, I'm curious, since you brought it up, you mentioned the distinct canons that kind of melted together. It reminds me a lot of what happened with Vampire the Masquerade in the reverse order. The tabletop game obviously came out first, then we did Mind's Eye Theater, and again, that was kind of meant to be a distinct continuity, but then over time, those two kind of came more and more in lockstep. So did you guys see a lot of people just assuming the tabletop was canon, or is it more they were drawing inspiration from it and naturally bled into the game, or was it more that the live action was doing cool stuff and you wanted to reflect that in the tabletop? Which kind of direction the inspiration go, do you think?
That's sort of tough to say. It was sort of an organic change.
Mm-hmm.
We found in the beginning that there were so many people buying the tabletop books just to have more information on the LARP world and then taking inspiration back and forth, that it sort of seemed like a futile effort to try and keep them as two separate, like, canons and stories and the whole nine, because one was going to morph into the other anyway.
Right. Yeah,
we had people, we had more LARPers talking to us than tabletoppers. And if the LARPers wanted more material, it's like, why wouldn't we just give it to them?
No, it makes a ton of sense. And I could see, like, a lot of your later books did seem like they were more focused on setting material than necessarily what we would call crunch. So it's a lot of, here's this area of the world, here's some new strain information, and enough tabletop crunch to kind of satisfy people. But it did seem like it was probably 80-20 in terms of setting material, which is something that, again, ports very well to live action.
Yeah. And also live action's been changing over the past 10 years a lot more too, where it's getting further away from, like, as you said, the crunch, and going more toward the narrative and the story. So it's really about just sort of designing where you want to go with things.
Kind of funny. I think back on when we were first, or when Michael was first, like, writing the material, like the actual mechanics of the LARP, kind of looked at each other one day and we're like, do we really need to have mechanics? It's like, yeah, that's how LARP is, man. Like, all right, fine, we'll make rules. We can't just play pretend. He's like, no, you can't just play pretend. I'm like, all right, fine, we'll do it. And now we find ourselves here 10 years later where, we're just minimizing it and kind of, getting things as streamlined as possible. It's funny.
Yeah, right. It's like, but really, though? Do we know the rules?
I just want to play pretend. That's, I can
Absolutely.
make up rules.
And it is interesting to bring it up. And so for the context of listeners, the next chunk of this is going to be weird because I'm going to be talking about the things that we all three of us know about for the benefit of the audience. Because I came on board pretty early, but I don't actually know the relationship of how you guys got in touch with Onyx Path. But I do know some of that conversation was on the same boat of things have evolved in the past 10 years. You guys were more focused on a live action game, and Onyx Path seemed like a natural partner. But did they approach you? Did you approach them? I actually don't know that piece of it.
I knew Matt McElroy. He used to be our rep for Drive-Thru. And so we just kind of became friends, loosely through there. And then as all three of us are well aware, you just kind of, you make convention friends. And then, people you see every year or every couple of years or a couple times a year. And, I just realized one day, I don't know what I was doing, but I realized that, like, LARP was really our focus, like live events and immersive stuff. Like, that's really where we shine with our skills and our whole team, really. And as much as I love publishing, it's really not our we're not as good at it.
Yeah, it's such a forte.
And so I just kind of was like, I wonder. And I kind of jokingly pitched it to Matt the next time I saw him. I was like, hey, you guys ever think about doing other stuff? I got this zombie thing over here. And it just kind of evolved from there. So it's Drive-Thru's fault in a rounded sort of way.
as most things are in our industry.
Yeah. And then we talked for probably 2 years. We've been talking, kind of meeting at Midwinter, meeting at Gen Con, and a couple of emails back and forth, and then until we kind of, I think by the time we brought you into the conversation, it was pretty much like, yes, okay, this is going to happen. Now we just need to settle on the details.
Yeah, actually, and that's a great segue because we recorded kind of a deep dive into the DRE game specifically for the podcast. So I'm not going to go into as much about that. But one of the things I talked about on there is the fact, because I remember we met at Gen Con 2017. I mean, we had known each other, I think, again, this time we see each other at cons kind of thing. Hey, I see you at Midwinter, blah, blah, blah. So it's like kind of face recognition. But I remember we all sat down, we were like in the middle of the hallway at Gen Con because there's no other place to sit down. And Rich was like, hey, well, introduce everyone around. This is Eddy Webb. He's the line developer for Dystopia Rising. And I was like, wait, what? I am? Because I had forgotten that before I left for Ireland. Well, Rich did tell me before I left for Ireland that he wanted me to do that, and I said, yeah, sure, that sounds great. I'm in the middle of this international move, and I just forgot about it.
Oh, fair.
So I didn't just find out at the meeting. I was reminded at the meeting. Because I originally had in my head, like, Rich wanted me there. Oh, kind of just like, this is Eddie. He's my consultant. He knows LARP stuff. He can translate from LARP to Rich, But then it was like, you're a line developer. It's like, oh, right. No, yes, we did talk about that. So, on that amazingly professional start, we began our relationship. But, I mean, it's one thing that actually, I know I've talked about this online, and it's not just because I have you guys on the show, it's not just because you're on the Onyx Pathcast, but, I mean, I genuinely do believe it's been really interesting working with you guys, and great working with you guys as a license partner, because a lot of my license experience has been with very rigid licenses. You're working on Futurama for, say, you have very strong things you need to work on. You work on Walking Dead, there's only certain things you can and can't do. You work on World Darkness, there's a very strong vision for it. And so it was initially a bit odd for me when I was starting working with you guys, because I was presenting relatively faithful, this is the material I have, so I'm going to stay within those lines, outlines and the like, and the reaction from both of you was very much like, no, you can change this, that's fine. And I was like, what?
You throw it all in the garbage if you want.
Yeah. I mean, well, let's not go that far. You can tell which of us does the writing. Well, I mean, one of our first conversations was, hey, there are some major changes we've wanted to do with the DR for a while, but we just never had the means or the abilities to do so. And some of the things we're talking about, like, you brought up as well, and it was one of the easiest conversations, because it was, or at least from my perspective, it was, hey, here are some things that I've found problematic for a while that I want to change. And you're like, wow, this is going to be a lot easier, because there are some things that I find problematic that I want to change. And then we just ended up matching up on those.
Yeah, I mean, it was really fascinating, because I was very much like, I'm not sure if they're going to be okay with this, and you were like, here are these questions, like, oh, that's almost exactly the things I was going to point out. And in particular, the strains and how they came about. It reminded me a lot of the early work we did on Werewolf the Apocalypse 20th Anniversary Edition, and some parts of Vampire, in the sense that you have these strong archetypes, and having a strong archetype is fantastic for any kind of role-playing game, because it's I get how this works, and I can put myself in that role and play it at a high level, and then I can add nuance later or discover nuance later. But it's very easy to slide from strong archetype to racial stereotype.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And it's something that, especially in the past 10 years, people have become more aware of, become more vocal about. And so it was genuinely exciting to hear licensors saying, yeah, no, we can do better. It's that these pieces haven't aged well, so let's address those. And you're right, we had some great conversations about pain points, and also just kind of a high level thing. Like, I know I brought onto the table a lot of saying, hey, let's talk about disability in DR. Because it was something that hadn't really been talked about before, but it's something I feel strongly about in post-apocalyptic fiction in general, that disability is weirdly both fetishized and shunned.
Yeah.
Because it's people who are disabled can't possibly survive this experience, and yet a lot of characters in post-apocalyptic fictions have missing arms, missing limbs, assisted devices.
It's one of the largest reoccurring themes that you see through the Mad Max series is people with disabilities either overcoming or adapting, or, as you said, fetishized for the aspect that they have these unique aspects of themselves that make them above or apart from the mass of the movie, the rest of the movie.
Right, exactly. And that was one thing that I found compelling about this relationship, and I think it's worth calling out, is my experience. A lot of licensors, especially for, like I said, entrenched franchises, don't always understand why what they're doing works the way it does. So when you want to bring change on board, they're reluctant, because they're like, okay, well, we know this works the way it is. We don't want to really move too many pieces because we're afraid of breaking what works. And the fact that we have kind of, like we just had, it's like, we know where our lineage comes from. We know the fiction we're building off of and how those work, and we can deconstruct those to make better changes in this property, in Dystopia Rising. So it was really an interesting kind of relationship that I'm not had as a licensed partner. So I mean, it's exciting, and the fact that you guys are aggressive about trying to introduce more and more inclusivity. Actually, I want to talk about that a bit. Like, you were one of the first live action groups to remove sexual assault as a background material, right?
Yes.
Yep. How was that? How did people react to that?
I'll say the majority thought it was great. Mm-hmm. Then this was earlier on. I can remember, let's see, it was probably year 3 that we like made it a like hard set rule. Year 3 was about when the network really started to explode, and we realized, oh, we have to put all these things in writing now. And so that was about when it happened, and it became a hallmark of a new branch that they would put their groups together on Facebook and all those social media stuff, and the conversations would start, and like clockwork, someone would post somewhere in there about how dumb it was that they couldn't use that as a topic, and this game was stupid, and they're never going to play it. And we're like, cool, see you later.
Right.
But overwhelmingly positive, with a totally expected percentage of people that I really don't want playing the game saying that it was a problem. So I consider it like a favor, where they were self-identifying as problems and seeing themselves to the door before they even came in. So.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's one thing we've noticed as well is that it's no secret that the original White Wolf and Onyx Path certainly has a left-leaning aesthetic. And so having people say, hey, this isn't the game for me, maybe it could be phrased a little better, but I mean, it's like, oh, if that's not the game for you, fantastic. There are going to be other games that maybe cater more to your experience or desired outcome, fantastic. I absolutely encourage you to explore those and find those. It doesn't have to be a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, there is no game or philosophy or game that is, or like even art that is going to introduce an idea, a drive, a want, a focus that is going to be everything for everyone. Right. So you have to pick the points that are the most important to you as a creative, as a narrative, as a company, and you just have to sort of stick with those. And some people aren't going to like it, and that's okay.
That's okay. We didn't build DR to be like a progressive platform, or like, it wasn't. We didn't go into it saying, well, let's build a network of LARPs all over the country that will have progressive and inclusive ideals. Mm-hmm. We just saw what we knew what we wanted in a game, and so just kind of built it. So it's honestly been really interesting over the years to get like both the good and the bad of the results of choices that we made because they just seemed inherently like the correct choices for us. Right. And weren't necessarily things that we actively thought about or chose. So,
right. Yeah. And that can go both ways, is that if you sometimes you don't think about them, you don't necessarily implement them in the best possible way. And also, I mean, and something I know we've talked about is you guys have the additional burden of post-apocalypse as a genre is, to a certain degree, right-leaning.
It's actually one of the hardest parts is how do you keep the aggressive, very like looking out for yourself, survivalistic aspect of post-apocalypse, while still wanting to cater to a more left-leaning narrative and community. It's been an active thought process through all of it.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, but I'm curious. I mean, do you find you're getting a wider net that way? I mean, obviously, you're right. You put out the product you want, and you hopefully attract the people that you would want to play that game. But I mean, are you getting a lot of people who are kind of on both sides of the spectrum, who are just kind of, put all that stuff aside when they play the game, or is it a little more kind of factionalized?
I think it's a bit of a mixed bag. I know that we I will say that I'm not at every branch. Obviously, I don't know every single player, but overall, the leanings of the community as a whole are more progressive than conservative. Mm-hmm. I know that there's been a few times where it's kind of come up in the periphery of us, having nothing to do with DR specifically, other than the people involved all play DR. Or like, I know there was recently an issue where somebody had put up some very more conservative political choices on their personal page, and other players were coming to the directors and saying, "Hey, this person has these beliefs. You can't have this." And we're like, "No, man, that's not how this works. They're allowed to believe in whatever funding for whatever that they want. If they start coming to events and start yelling, political beliefs that maybe are not as progressive as we'd like, then we maybe need to have a conversation of, this is maybe not where you should be having these thoughts yelling out loud." But overall, it's pretty. I think we're pretty progressive in a general sense.
Well, and the reason why I kind of dug into that is because as I was working on it, one of the things I found fascinating about the Dystopia Rising property as a designer is that you have personal tension kind of built into the background. It does remind me a bit of, to a certain degree, World Darkness, but it's actually more distinct in the fact that there's explicitly like these groups don't like each other, and it's also not a binary. It's like every group kind of just doesn't like other group, and then on top of that, there's a whole bunch of different creeds, religions, and they all have different beliefs, and many of them don't get along well. So there's a lot of built-in abstracted conflict inside the game, and it can be very powerful for players to get into those mindsets and explore them and step away going, wow, okay, that's weird, and I felt uncomfortable. Maybe I should think about that on a personal level. But also sometimes it can lead to problems too. And it's something I know we've all been talking about and working on. We mentioned it earlier, that try to move things more towards that abstraction and let people make the connections to real world concerns that they may have without necessarily saying this is a binary, A is always B. This group is always that group in real life, but more along the lines of this group is like this, so it could be one of these 4 or 5 other groups, and in my life I identify more with this particular group, and not this. And by playing that, maybe I feel differently about my politics or beliefs or opinions. So I mean, it's interesting to me that this is a property that allows people to explore that in a relatively safe way, and so it's something that, as a designer, I tried to emphasize more. It's like the game is about community, and that's something else to kind of bring it back to the game. It's a positive post-apocalyptic game. There's a thread of hope through it that you just don't see in most post-apoc fiction. Things will get better. Things are starting to get better. They still suck. People are still horrible to each other, but communities are starting to actually work together and build something from the ashes, and that's an interesting moment, especially when you have this kind of not mandatory but certainly implied antagonism between groups. So how has that kind of spun out in live action chronicles, where this is kind of push and pull between antagonism and community building?
I think so. I think one of the biggest difficulties with it is when you're creating a fictional world that has a parallel that connects to the real world, there's a very real opportunity for people to see things as coding based on their experience, or to experience a degree of bleed because of how things are changed, or how things are going in the outside world.
Right.
And some people are able to use it as a tool to, approach subjects and learn and grow. Other people, I mean, everyone's at a different point in their life with their understanding of how they engage their hobbies, how they engage other people.
Right.
Everyone has different degrees of, if you look at the internet, everyone's got different degrees of social capacity for engaging others and having those conversations. So in some instances, people will look at the game world and how the stories that they can create together to to have this really positive effect or enlightening effect, and for others it's almost uncomfortable how much it gets missed.
Right.
Like there have been scenarios in some of our games where like parallels that seem clear to me have happened in regards to the real world, and it's just completely 100% gotten missed in the narrative.
Sure, and I do think one thing I try to work on as a designer is that I feel like people should walk away from those experiences, and if they don't want to dig under the surface, can they still have a satisfying experience? Like I went camping, I beat up some zombies, I'm happy, done. Great, you had a good time, that's wonderful. You didn't detract from the experience by your presence. Grand.
Exactly.
But people can walk away from that going, oh, just. I'm seeing a lot about religious intolerance here. I'm seeing a lot about, to actually pull an example up, one of the strains, their flaw is that they actually look like a zombie. And I always thought that was particularly loaded with potential, is because these things that we have to kill to survive, but this guy looks exactly like that thing.
Yep.
And so there's a strong parallel to, what the surface could look like and how that can alienate you or cause you to misread or misunderstand the situation. I can also see why people might necessarily not want to dig into that, whether it's something they experience in their daily lives, they want to forget about it for a while, or if it's something they just don't particularly want to engage with that moment and go, okay, well, I get to pull with some cool, creepy zombie makeup and freak people out. There's two different ways that stuff can play, and it's exciting to me that I like properties and games where people can play on both levels without necessarily getting each other's way.
Yeah.
Because there are certainly games where you have to engage on that in some level because that's part of the background, part of the story, and people don't feel comfortable with that. But it's the way I've seen DR pitch and the way hopefully I think the tabletop will come across is that if you want to get a bunch of your buddies, you pick all of your special sets of powers and you get together and you fight raiders and you fight zombies and you build a society and everything's wonderful. Yay! That's totally viable and completely does not break the world in any way. But if you also want to have a game where people are at each other's throats and don't understand each other and they're constantly trying to get one up better on the other person and stick out on their own, that also can be done. And they can coexist in the same world.
Yeah, one of my major inspirations in design and writing, without a doubt, is Romero. And it's not even just because of the zombie aspect. It's, if you look at the zombie films that, taking the apocalyptic portion out that Romero made, not only were they, great horror films if you're a horror buff, but on top of it, each of them had a social commentary that you could dig into that was beyond, the rot and the teeth. A commentary on jingoism or a commentary on capitalism or blind politicalism or racism. Like, you could go to the film and go, wow, I just got to see someone ripped to shreds in a mall. That's awesome. Or you can read further into it and have a different experience. But having one experience or the other doesn't make it the other viewpoint bad.
Right, and also if people are playing the game and inadvertently stumble in some of these symbols, that doesn't also necessarily make them inherently bad people, because sometimes they use the game as a safe space to try to work through some of these perspectives and opinions.
Yeah.
And so allowing some space to kind of say, okay, well, what you said to Mary about her beliefs, you couldn't apply that to someone who's Catholic or someone who's Muslim. So maybe think about how that works. But because it was in the game, it's just my character. You can kind of brush that off and people can kind of, okay, cool, whatever. And then allow you time to reflection if you feel that's important to you. And that's something else I think is important is allowing people the ability to mess up, to make mistakes, to not be perfect all the time. And again, post-apocalypse, again, is a great metaphor for this, I think, because someone made horrible mistakes in the past. That's why we're in this place now.
Yep.
And so it kind of gives you a perspective of, okay, well, so I didn't necessarily... I wasn't as nice as person as I could have been. But, at least I didn't, bomb all of society. So I guess I got that going for me. So, I mean, It's exciting that you guys are thinking about this stuff and are engaging with this stuff. But it can be challenging. It can be tricky. And I know I was nervous when we first started talking about it, and then when the Kickstarter started, because live action groups are very passionate.
Yep.
I think it's safe to say.
Yep.
Good word.
And both good and bad ways. I mean, but also they a lot of times, especially if you've been living sometimes literally in a space for a long period of time, you can become very focused on specific details of a property and making sure those are handled correctly. And so certainly I was nervous because you're right, we're making a lot of changes and a lot of reapproaches to things. But at least from my end, it seems like the reaction's been really, really positive. Has that been what you guys have seen as well?
For the most part, yeah. Like, of course, internet culture, there's always going to be someone who, whether they actually read the content or the commentary or not, is going to light you on fire because that's the day they're having.
Right.
But yeah, for the highest majority, I haven't seen much in the way of negativity about it. It's been almost universally positive, which is terrifying to me.
I think that just tells us that it's time.
Yeah.
We've had almost a decade, just shy of a decade's worth of gameplay that has happened since the material was written. Mm-hmm. Even the later books were. What was the last time we put a book out? Like 2-3 years ago, something like that.
Which means it was written 4 to 5.
Yeah, so the material has been out for a long time, and we're as I'm sure you know, Eddie, and maybe the listeners know or not, we are in the midst of writing a whole new system for the LARP as well, which is going to come out kind of in tandem with the tabletop, and with that we're doing a 3-year jump of storyline, so that it's just long enough that if people want to keep stuff similar, they can, but it's also gives them an opportunity to kind of evolve their characters or change some stuff or, go in a different direction. So I think that I think, or I like to hope that the majority of people are excited to see the world change and see new fiction, see new world material based on the changes that have happened both in character in the LARP world itself, and out of character. So I think people are excited for it. I know we're looking forward to it.
Absolutely. And I have been seeing some people have been taking some really interesting interpretations. Some, at least on the surface level, so far, are things that I think we all intended. One thing that we talked about a little bit, but kind of more explicitly for this episode, we decided to restructure how strains work entirely. For people who aren't familiar, strains are kind of your character race, for lack of a better term, your clan in vampire, your tribe in werewolf, what have you. And it was very kind of binary. You pick one of 21 options, and that is the thing you are, and move forward. And we, pretty late in the first draft process, we decided to switch to what I've called lineages, which are 8 kind of archetypes of strains, and then from there are 3 derivations of each. And it does a couple of things. The nice setting need, I think, that addresses, and the main surface reason why we talk about it, is it allows us to make even more strains afterwards. We can do regional, small level strains and just say, cool, you're part of one of these 8 groups, but maybe there's 15 derivations of each group that we don't know about yet. There could be 100 strains now if we want to make that many. And just say, cool, here's your core 8 packages, and we're just doing a new version of one of those core 8. So it allows us to extend and grow. And I know that was one piece you guys talked about, was that, you had the idea that strains were kind of regionalized, and we could do more of that now with this direction. But the other piece, the meta piece that I find interesting, that was kind of in the back of my head, but I don't think I articulated it. It was more kind of, I was half instinct, half subconscious, was that the idea that some of these strains are related in a way that they had not previously been linked.
Yes.
And so the iconic example I've been going to, and other people mentioned, is the Baywalkers and the Yorkers, who have a notorious rivalry in the fiction. But now they're part of the same lineage. And so it adds a different meta perspective. And none of the characters recognize that they're related. We as players know that they're related. And so it's like, oh, you guys hate each other because you're very similar to each other. And now the mechanics is explicitly telling you that is objectively true. They are very similar. And so it adds a different kind of texture and frisson to that relationship that didn't exist in the game before. And so I'm finding it fascinating that people are walking away with brand new ideas, or they're looking at some of the new mechanics we've applied to characters, and they're going, oh, this explains why my character was this way for 6 years. And it's just like they had, obviously they could not have been inspired by that material didn't exist back then, but now they're retroactively going, this adds even more depth to my experience. I just personally find it's amazing that's the reaction they're walking away with.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the design aspect that went into like the legacies and the strains and pointing out how they're on a genetic level related to each other sort of is a almost retroactive explanation of what the players were figuring out without actively knowing all the time.
Oh, okay.
Like there were a lot of people making guesses on how the strains were genetically related to one another in the LARP communities. So much so that I've seen multiple posts from people saying, I'm vindicated in seeing, this design system. My theory's been right all along. And that's a beautiful sort of thing, because it means, while it is a massive change to the design, at the same time, it's not a massive change to the narrative, which is cool.
Right. Exactly. Now, something I know I was very careful about when talking with you guys. That I didn't want to make any changes that invalidated people's previous story.
Yep.
We want to make sure that they could, a 3-year jump, they could still feel like that past continuity was still connected to. But one change that I know I specifically brought to the table, and again, people seem to be gravitating to, was resurrection. In Dystopia Rising, people die, they can come back, and they go through a concept called the grave mind, which is the infection that populates the whole planet. And as they're being rebuilt, they go through this traumatic experience. It can be personal, it can be objectively just horrible, but if they survive that experience on an emotional and a mental level, then they come back relatively intact. Otherwise, they become a zombie, or they become a traitor, or whatever. They become a non-player character in some form. And originally, the mechanics were just kind of, you get a certain number of points where you could do that. So you have, you come back 3 or 4 times, and that's it. You're done. You had your chance. Goodbye. And one thing I wanted, because what I saw from the fiction was that there was a push and pull of emotional bonds. You kind of hate each other, and you kind of have to work together all in the same moment. And that constant push and pull from, I get more if we are a community, but I am inherently antagonistic to what you believe and say, brings a lot to the table. And so I wanted to play with that and the idea of coming back with, from the grave minds with emotional bonds cut. And it was exciting because, again, that was a huge change. I'm like, I don't know if this is going to fly. And just to hear you go, oh my God, that's amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
This was really, really helpful. And
I think that was verbatim my response, actually.
It was pretty close. And I've been seeing other people, other hardcore players, saying the same thing. They're like, yes, this is an explicit change from how I did things before, but I love this so much more. And I mean, I know I've mentioned this a few times, but I mean, I think it's important for all the listeners to hear from all three of us, is that was terrifying, at least for me.
Yeah. Oh, approaching this project overall is, from like the moment the conversation started, has been terrifying for me. Like, I'm looking at 10 years of player investment, like content that's been developed like over a decade's worth of material, and looking and going, oh, do we really need to start the next? Yeah, I know we need to, but I need someone outside of my head to say it. Otherwise, I'm gonna back away from that.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't even want to. We had to convince you.
So. Yeah, really.
Yeah. It was actually, I don't. If I'm gonna be perfectly honest, both Michael and I were like, no, I'm not. No. I was like, no, that's way too many angry Facebook posts. I can't do that. And it was our third partner, Jeff, who was like, no, it needs it, and we should do it. So, fine, you're taller than us.
We logically know, but we
We
don't
know,
want
yeah,
to
we know he
do
was
it.
right. And so
But also very Zen-esque.
Yeah, there's-
You're in charge.
Yep. I mean, it was difficult to approach because, you get in the tabletop design, because having done both sides of it, it's like, all right, when you're engaging your community and you're creating a book and they read the book and they like the book, you don't see the faces all the time. Like you get to see them at conventions, so the engagement has like a little bit more of a fire gap between you and the response you get. Running the live side of it and walking into a room and hearing someone say they love something, makes your heart swell all the way up. And then when you have that one person who just, that one person who's at the concert in the back of the room who for whatever reason just won't dance or won't have a good time, and they have that little font of negativity, that hits you just as hard. So approaching the idea of, all right, we had X number of successes and we've had, Y number of failures and internet scars and bloody noses on the way to here. Do we really want to start that rodeo again? What was an earnestly hard decision?
Mm-hmm.
Like logically we knew it happened, but that's a lot of emotional and social wound up in that as well.
And certainly, and I, came from I've been through it to a certain degree, because even though Vampire the Masquerade 20th Anniversary Edition wasn't by any stretch a reimagining of it. It was meant to be a celebration of the existing material. There were still places where we, both either by design need or just because things have changed in the past 20 years, needed to kind of adjust and modify some setting material. And a couple places where we had to do it to be more inclusive, not only just in a social justice sense, but also in a keeping more options to play sense. And there were a lot of strong reactions at the early stages to that. Little things like bringing the Tremorian tribute back in the Sabbat. People were like, "Oh my God, no, we killed them." It's like, no, you didn't. You didn't kill them. You didn't do anything. That happens. That happened in continuity. But I mean, you're right. People get invested by that, and so it is easy, I think, for people who aren't on this side of things, who are just in the communities, to think that this is a cold, passionless decision that gets made, for extremely corporate reasons, and some of those might also be true, but there is certainly a fear. We don't want to screw up your favorite game.
Yeah,
we want you to keep loving this game. We want you to love it even more afterwards. So it was, again, I mean, it's good to kind of have a relationship where we were able to kind of have each other's backs and say, okay, let's, is this cool? No, we're cool. Okay, cool. And I think you're right. I think some of it was just hearing somebody outside of our heads articulating it. To go, okay, all right, no, I'm not losing I'm not losing the thread of things. I'm not making a mistake. This is probably a good direction.
Yeah.
In terms of people getting mad at changes and the fact that we want we want the people who like the game to like the game. I often think back in a conversation that we had with a player in the New Jersey branch, which we used to run directly, who messaged us very concerned because he had heard that we were going to be doing a TPK, which I had not heard of. And I had to ask, I was like, what exactly is that? And he said, a total player kill. As in for some reason, we're going to just kill every character in the game. And I've had this conversation in different forums over the years where we had to explain, like, okay, dude, totally get that you're upset about that. I would be upset too. Sure. We're a business. Why would we do something to intentionally infuriate our fan base? Right. Just give me a second. Take a step back, just consider it a little bit. And I think that gets, when people get so invested in their character or the world or material or, the experiences they've had, that they kind of lose sight of, like, if we just look at it from like a cold corporate standpoint, companies want their customers to be happy.
Right.
That's just good business. I guess if they're really bad at their business, then maybe they don't want it. But like, when changes are made, I think it's important. I wish people would maybe keep in mind more that, like, changes are made with a lot of consideration and planning, and, like, is this best for what we're trying to do? Does this, sit in line with the things that we've done before, or is it an improvement or an evolution of what we've done in the past? It's.
And also, I mean, we're gonna fuck it up. I mean, it's another thing that is sometimes frustrating is, like, sometimes mistakes were made, and occasionally there's a good reason for it. Sometimes there's not. Sometimes it's just nope, that was a bad call. We're trying to work that. We're trying to roll that back. We're trying to do better. Could you lay off the mistake a bit so we can try to do better next time?
As much as I appreciate hearing about a decision I made 10 years ago that I have learned from and have made active changes from this point forward, how about I stop hearing about a spelling error from the first edition?
Dude, I still get page XX jokes. Still.
Oh my god.
And it's like, we haven't done that in like 5-6 years. Easy.
I think part of it is that to people who don't work on this side of things, they imagine that there's these giant, like, ziggurat, like, corporate machines that just have endless resources and endless income and endless numbers of employees.
Yep.
who specifically you have someone who is hired to just find index XX, or to go through the first DR book where an autocorrect made it from fire retardant to fire retarded clothing.
Oh, yeah.
And you go, no, that's those mistakes are going to happen, and we're going to do everything within our power to make sure those mistakes don't happen. But at the same time, we can't sell a book for $300 for the amount of money it would cost to pay that many people to have that degree of involvement.
And also, I mean, even large companies, sometimes this happens.
Yeah.
There's famously TSR put out, I think it was a combined D&D rule set. And an editor clearly did a find replace wizard or mage to wizard. And so you have, instead of damage, you have the wizard all throughout the book. And that got printed, that got published. That is a book that exists you could buy, and now it's like 94.
Yep.
And that was a company that had a lot of resources behind it at the time. So, I mean, these things happen.
Yep.
And I think it's fair, and I think it's correct for communities to call out and say, you know what, you could do better here. It's like, cool, thank you, we appreciate that. Thank you for
that feedback. You know what, this is what I want.
Yep.
That's what I'm going to do.
Absolutely. So, I mean, that's why I am both terrified by and enjoy the open development experience. By putting up a pre-edited manuscript for the Kickstarter, it allows us to kind of gather this information, and thus far, it's only a few days in, but thus far, the commentary I've gotten have been all very constructive, very positive. Like, hey, this could be, maybe tweak this thing, maybe adjust this. Like, some people brought up that the salt-wise stuff isn't quite lining up with the flavor text. It's like, cool, one of those needs to change. That's a really good point. Let's adjust that. Yep. And it's like I had direct concerns because it's an aquatic-based strain. I want to make sure that their powers or disability don't make them disproportionately powerful or crippled in relationship to water, because then you have entire places you can't play anymore. But it's a valid point.
Yeah, that's a difficulty because the strain by design is linked to an environmental aspect, and when that environmental aspect is removed from play, if their advantage is directly in relation to aquatic aspects, there's no bonus.
Right.
Like, yeah, I feel you on that.
Yeah. So I mean that's the kind of thing. It's like, I hadn't really thought that completely through. I had done some thought on that, but that's a good point. And so that kind of stuff, getting that kind of feedback is really, really great. Like one person found a copy and paste error. It's like, that's fine. I mean, it's pre-edit, but still good to catch stuff. But there is always the kind of lingering fear of, oh, by the way, here's this crippling flaw that is throughout your entire book. It's going to require a massive rewrite. Or even worse, is something that is integral to the game and it's not actually a flaw per se.
Yeah.
I know one of my quote-unquote favorite feedback comments on Pugmire was basically, why isn't this powered by the apocalypse? And I'm like, because reasons. I mean, I can't even engage with that comment because no, it's not the game. It's not your preferred game system. sorry. But sometimes it's also, like when we did War of the Clans, the Ravnos material, it was pointed out to me that the G word commonly used to reference the Ravnos was in fact a racial slur. And that was a hard thing to disentangle from the material, but I did it because it was important to do. But that was like when I was like, oh crap, I have to do that now. But it was important and it was necessary, and I'm glad in retrospect I did the hard work. But it was, you're always worried about those moments. But again, thus far it seems like, luckily this has been battle tested material. It's been 10 years. Most of the big concerns you guys are already aware of and kind of bucketed onto me, and people have gravitated and noticed those. So that's really, really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, we've made a lot of changes in the 10 years. Talking about the Ravnos book back in the first edition of the LARP book, back before we even printed it. It was just a PDF online. The G word was a nickname for one of the strains.
Showed up once.
We came up in fantasy games, and just kind of, that was the language. And somebody pointed it out to us. They're like, hey, actually, that's a terrible word. Oh, I did not know that. So that day, Michael went into the PDF, edited it, re-uploaded it, done. That was easy. It was probably the easiest fix we've ever had on the book, and that was, I don't love stuff like that, but I appreciate stuff like that because it's so easy to make those changes sometimes. Just the other day, somebody, a friend of mine, messaged me and said, "Hey, somebody was looking at this layout this kind of write up that one of you did for 3.0, and this one sentence has these. They saw some parallels and connotations that you probably aren't aiming at." And I read it. I was like, "Oh yeah, you know what? I can see how that. I see how that." I
can see how that can be interpreted that way.
And
Let's fix that.
So I just went on the website, deleted the sentence. We're done. It's really easy to make those changes. And I appreciate when those changes, or when those kind of maybe sticky areas are brought to our in the grand hour attention, but like in a, it's like anything else. You don't want to wake up in the morning to somebody punching you in the face. Right. You want somebody to kind of, just kind of jostle your shoulder and go, hey, it's time to get up. It's the same like, hey, there's this, I don't know if you thought about it, but there's this thing on page XXX that maybe needs some attention. And you can look at it and go, oh yeah, you're right. Let's fix that. Instead of, hey, you're the worst. You put this thing here. I hope you die. Like, okay, now I don't want to talk to you anymore.
Right. Exactly. And on that cheery note,
yeah, I got a little real there.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why I like doing these kinds of things, though, because, I mean, it would have been very easy for you to do, tell me about your property and limited company. I mean, I like digging into these things because it's, I think we've developed a good rapport with past year in this project, and it's nice to kind of get that out there to people more who can listen in the conversations. These are not different from the conversations we've been having over the past year, so.
Yeah.
No, it's been real, but it's been fun. So, how can people reach you guys online in acceptable ways?
Well, I think both of us have public Facebook profiles that can be found under both of our names, both Michael Pucci and Ashley Zdeb. You can also
business pages, not personal ones.
Yeah,
it actually I try to make it pretty clear with the labeling. We're also I don't know. Facebook is pretty much where I exist because I'm of that age group. I don't know. I do technically have a Twitter account, but I only use that to further my political beliefs. So maybe don't go there. Yeah, I think Facebook is probably the best place to find us. You can always, you can find all of DR and DR LARP stuff, on their respective websites, which is just dystopiarising.com. And you can contact us, via the customer service email that's there, which doesn't go directly to us, but, is forwarded to us when such appropriate emails come in. Yeah, cool. I think those are, yeah.
Yeah, then, Eschaton Media has an email address on the Eschaton Media page, and it's got a little thing that allows you to reach out to us. DR has the same. Imagination has the same. Really, a lot of it depends on what it is that you're reaching out to us about. If you want to talk about how to make better vegan ice cream, that's a personal thing. If you have something in relation to the LARP, and there's so many of them, and so many people that there's a person or people. All right, here's some transparency. That is so outside of the what I do as development that I can't tell you exactly what happens in the magic box until someone hits me upside the head and says, "Here's something that falls in your category. Take care of it." It makes it so that I can actually do development.
Right.
We made Michael a writer cave, and I don't let him out of it.
Truth. I like my writer cave.
You're protected from the horrible world outside.
No, I'm not. I wish I was, but no, I'm not.
I know.
You can just close the windows, Michael. It's fine. It's fine.
I am vaguely protected from making my way to the coffee pot. That's about it.
And at the time that this will be going live, the DRE Kickstarter, I should say, will still be live. So if you go to Kickstarter, search for Dystopia Rising Evolution. It should pop right up, and you can look at that and pledge. We will be releasing bits of the manuscript every week throughout the campaign. So by the time this goes live, you'll be looking at least the strains and character creation and a little bit of how the mechanics work. So that should give you a good slice of what the game's like if you're interested. So back it, download the stuff, and let us know what you think.
Please.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us, Eddie.
So that was a lot of fun. That was I think that went well. It got a little maudlin near the end where we were kind of talking about, please stop punching us in the face. We make mistakes 10 years ago. But, I think that's just the nature of designing games these days,
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Is like everything is public record. And if you look at like politically and on Twitter, people are going back and finding stuff people screwed up 10 years ago and holding their feet to the flames for it. So it depends on how you feel about that action, I guess. But personally, please. Sad.
I mean, it's. I think it's noteworthy to kind of talk about the fact that yes, we should continue to hold designers accountable to trying to get them to do better. I think it's good for them to do. But at the same time, I think there's value in sometimes saying, okay, we're trying. Can you recognize the fact that effort's being made, and not keep holding us to the fact that we made page XX errors 10 years ago.
Well, I mean, that's also part of a larger conversation I've been having recently is like, at what point do you kind of go like, okay, yeah, you screwed up, but it seems like you're learning and growing.
Right.
And I think that we should always give people room to learn and grow, aside from in the most egregious situations.
Right.
And let's face it, we work on role-playing games. Very few of our situations are the most egregious.
Right.
So, yeah. But, I mean, I thought it was cool. That was our first duo interview, was it not?
Yeah, it's the first time we had one host and two guests as opposed to two hosts and one guest.
And, I mean, they've worked together for so long that you can really, tell that they play off each other, I think, really
absolutely,
well.
yeah. There's definitely a lot of finishing each other's sentences kind of thing. Lots of, moving from one person to another. I know something that Rich and I have done a lot because we've done a lot of panels and the like. So we have kind of the same dynamic, I think, which is where he'll say something and I'm kind of, oh yeah, then we blah, blah. And I think the three of us are starting to develop that too a bit. I noticed that when you and I and Megan did the freelancing panel, there seemed to be a lot of that where you would kind of just naturally pick up my thread, except for the one time where I mentioned you work for hire and everything went chaotically bad. But
I mean, it wasn't chaotically bad. Like, the room didn't catch fire. But
well, that's a goal for next year.
So aside from learning that the LARP came first, what was your favorite thing that you learned from that interview, or that was like new and interesting to you?
It was interesting to me when we were able to kind of talk about where things come from, because as I mentioned, sometimes when you work in a licensed product, the people who hold the license don't always know what makes that license work. And it's very refreshing to work with licensors who said, no, we draw inspiration from the George Romero vampire or zombie films. We draw inspiration from this kind of political horror direction.
Right.
And the political aspect of zombie films is not something that a lot of people making zombie games are fully aware of, and how that shades and colors a game. So talking to a company that goes, no, we totally understand where we're coming from, and this is what we're building from, so we know when we make changes what kinds of pieces need to stay stable to have that aesthetic work, and what pieces can move around and adjust in order to accommodate a new and more modern vision. Not to say that other...
Go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, that it's not to say that other license holders are bad, because they don't know it. It's just the fact that things change over, new companies acquire IPs, or new creative staff change over, and so sometimes that stuff just gets lost rather than having a strong creative vision throughout the project.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that some people don't really get that a lot of zombie films, especially things like Night of the Living Dead, are kind of inherently political.
Right.
And are kind of inherently commentaries at the same time as they're just fun horror movies. And I like how, I mean, some politics, some real world stuff is what influenced, like, changing the strains.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, just kind of where your post-apocalyptic meets the real world, and kind of how you balance those two things. Like, what kind of people play games versus what kind of world are you giving them to play?
Right, exactly.
So, yeah. I'm excited to, like, actually get to play the tabletop version at some point. I haven't gotten to play it yet, because it was still mostly just testing before we went to Kickstarter.
Yeah, and we've been getting some good...
at Midwinter.
Yeah, we've been getting some good feedback on the Kickstarter, and we're, at this time of recording, about 150% funded, which is great.
Yeah, like just over, which is really cool.
Yeah.
So awesome. I'm excited about it. I'm excited to see it in all of its glory, because like I was saying when we interviewed you, like, I haven't even edited this one yet. So this is one of the first books we've had in a while that's gone to Kickstarter that I haven't read. So I'm kind of like, I don't even know what it's all about yet. All I've read I kind of went through some of the sections that have been released to backers, because yes, I backed it. I like to back our games. I'm sorry. I like the pretty copies. But yeah, so I've like read some of the first preview, but then as probably our listeners might not be aware of, even though I've talked about the convention episode, I just got back from Dragon Con.
Yeah.
So I haven't done anything with work for the past 8 days, and I am sitting here recording this podcast and waiting to get back to my pile of emails.
So how did Dragon Con go for you?
Dragon Con was fun. It's interesting to talk about on here because, like I said before, even though there is gaming at Dragon Con, and I am absolutely certain there are people that go there and do nothing but either LARP or play tabletop games all weekend, gaming is not why I go to Dragon Con.
Right.
And I don't think it's why the vast majority of people go to Dragon Con.
That's
Dragon
fair.
Con's a 24-hour party con. There's really cool panels. They get really great guests. I saw a panel with Gita Torres from Firefly, who I love.
Ooh.
She is funny and gorgeous and smart, so she was really, really interesting. I saw a panel with Walter Koenig and John Delancey from Star Trek.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and then I just kind of walked around the Walk of Fame. Oh, yeah, I met Courtney Taylor, who voices Heather and Damsel in Bloodlines.
Oh, wow.
And I told her she was super cool, and then we talked about how, that was actually kind of, like, some of those roles were actually kind of hard for her because it was one of her early jobs, and that was kind of a cool, like, World of Darkness adjacent thing that happened. And it was kind of funny because while I was there, Ian Watson was at Fan Expo in Toronto, and he met a couple of the actors as well from Bloodlines.
Right, yeah.
So I think all these actors are a little confused when we walk up and are like, hey, remember this game you did 14 years ago?
Right, and they're like, no.
even though Courtney Taylor is also like Jack from Mass Effect. Like she's very famous for a lot of other things. So I think she was a little confused when this girl walked up and just started talking to her about Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. But
Did you get a chance to see Ric Flair there?
I saw him at his table, and I watched part of the wrestling event on TV, because Dragon Con has like their own broadcast TV they do for all the host hotels.
Oh, cool.
So I saw some of them on television, and I walked past the wrestling booths a few times, and the only one who was consistently there was Lita.
Oh, cool.
Who is just as amazing looking in person as on TV. And like, I'm mad at her because you were this pretty when I was like 18, and you're still this pretty. But no, I watched some of the wrestling event, and they all made appearances there, which was really cool. But yeah, no, I didn't like go up and meet a whole bunch of them. I kind of thought about it, and I was like, I'm just gonna be this weirdo who's like, hi, I want to meet you because my coworkers like wrestling.
I want to understand what they're talking about. Please help me.
Yeah, I don't really know much about you except that you wear weird clothes. But yeah, I do kind of love to go completely like off on a tangent that wrestling has integrated itself into nerd fandom, because so many of my friends who are nerdy people into various fandoms are also into wrestling.
Yeah.
And for a lot of times people thought it something separate because it was like, oh, it's a sport.
Right.
It's a sport, so that's a sport thing. Nobody likes sport things. And then over the years, people started looking at the theatricality and the stories and the behind-the-scenes stuff and the fact that it's all, so hilariously fabricated and obviously such like a soap opera drama to watch that happens to include wrestling.
Right.
I mean, all of the costumes, everything. It really does, like, to me, wrestling's the one that kind of straddles that bridge between a nerdy fandom and a sports fandom. And
it's actually gotten more integrated because one of the bigger wrestlers right now, his name is Xavier Woods. He's part of a group called The New Day. And he's a huge nerd. He actually runs his own YouTube channel about video games called Up, Up, Down, Down, where all of his friends in WWE actually play video games. But he goes to Dragon Con every year. And he did a Sailor Moon Dragon Ball Z mashup this year.
Nice.
And actually, one of the things he did was he also dressed up, cosplayed as other wrestlers, but all the other female wrestlers. So he was doing gender-bending female wrestler cosplay of his coworkers, which is just amazing to me. That's
awesome. Also, Ember Moon, who wrestles, is a big nerd. Like she plays D&D. She's very open about that, and she I know that we sent her a few of our jump starts a while back just to be like, hey, if you like role-playing games, here you go.
Yeah.
You're big wrestling fans.
And she posted about it on her Instagram. It was Changeling and Pugmire and something else.
Exalted,
yes. Okay. So, I mean, the whole spectrum. So, very exciting.
Awesome. Okay, we should probably wrap this up since Matthew is not here to interrupt, so we can just talk forever, which is a really weird
It is kind of freeing,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I feel like I can just be myself. Like, this would be a great time if we were trying to do a really good bit for Matthew to barge in.
Right.
And just start yelling. But guess what? That's not going to happen because he's legitimately not here. This is not just trying to pull a thing.
This isn't a bit where, like, I'm locked in a closet. He's actually not here right now.
I mean, he's never here. He's always in England, but...
Right. So, on that awkward transition, how do people find you online?
Yeah, you can find me everywhere. Dixie Cyanide, which is, Twitter, Instagram, what have you. Yeah. And you?
People can find me just about anywhere at Eddie Fate. I have recently changed a little bit how I do Facebook specifically, but Eddie Fate will still take you to my writer page where I'm still going to post a lot of stuff there. I'm just shutting down a little bit my personal account and moving all of my rambling and podcast episode stuff to Eddie Web Writer, but if you type in Eddie Fate, it'll take you there. Or you can just ignore all of that and just go to my website, eddyfate.com or pugsteady.com. And with that... Well, sorry?
I was going to say, there's so many websites. Also, you can find us at theonyxpath.com, since I think you were just going to say bye.
I was just going to say bye, so yes, it's good.
And you can find the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, rate and review if you can. 5 stars would be awesome, but, give us as many stars as you think we deserve.
Right, but 5 would be best. And also the Onyx Path forums, which I believe are working again now. We had some problems with that before, but I think they're working now.
Yeah.
Lots of places to come chat with us. And as always, many worlds, one Pathcast.